Hi, today I'm going to be providing an overview of place value taught in grades 3 through 5. In another video, I have an overview of what is taught kindergarten through second grade. So just a quick review, in second grade, kids are working with numbers up to 1,000. Okay, so they understand what hundreds are, what tens are, and what ones are. 10 ones make a 10, 10 tens make 100, and then 1 10 hundreds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 makes 1,000. So in third grade, they're building on this knowledge, and now they're working with numbers up to 10,000. We want kids to be able to write the numbers in expanded form. And what I mean by that is that this would be 1,000 plus 200 plus 40 plus 5, which equals 1,245. We also want them to be able to write this in word form. So 1,000 245. It's very important that there aren't any ands. You don't see an and in here, right? So when I'm working with the little kids up to third grade, I really focus that they're not, or press upon that they're not saying and. It's not 245. It's not 1,245, because the and comes later with the decimal point. Also, sometimes it's confusing for kids, like when there isn't a value, like if there's 0 for that value, sometimes they will write this as this, 145. And that's where they learn really how important that 0 is as a placeholder for the hundreds. Okay. We also want them to be able to compare and order and write these numbers in word form. Something new that's taught in third grade, which can kind of be a little tricky, is rounding. We want kids to be able to round to the nearest tens and the nearest hundred. So there's 10 and nearest 100. So for example, if they're rounding 320 to the nearest 100, I like to show them this on a number line. Okay, well, 320 would be about here. I also like to put the midway point, 350. So then the question is, just which number is 320 closer to? Well, it's 20 jumps away from 300, but it's 80 jumps away from 400. Also, it's less than the midway point, so you must round it down to 300. Or we want them to be able to round to the nearest 10. So if they had 587, 587 is between 580, 590. The midway point would be right about there. 587 is more than the middle, and so it's 3 away from 590. It is 7 away from 580, and so it is rounded to 590. Moving on to fourth grade. Fourth graders are working with numbers up to 1 million. They need to be able to show it in expanded form, in word form, and standard form, which is just the number. Also, they're rounding to any place. When you're working with so many numbers, sometimes the place value chart comes in handy. So if they have the number 235,692, and they're rounding the nearest 10,000, sometimes it's helpful for them to circle what place that is, and then they can look next door to see, do I round up or do I round down? So this would be 240,000. Also, there's some like riddles and poems that help kids understand where to round, like 5 or more, let it soar, 4 or less, let it rest. I really advise not teaching those, because it's only teaching kids to memorize a poem or a rule and not understand what's going on behind the math. So that's really important that they understand the why. Also in 4th grade, kiddos are working with tenths and hundredths. And one of the ways we introduce that is we bring back this hundreds block. But this time, instead of this standing for 100, this square is standing for 1 whole. And so food is really an easy way to connect it with kids. So if you had a brownie, 1 brownie, would you rather cut it into tenths and share it with 10 people? Or would you rather cut it into hundredths? I'm not going to do all the hundredths here. Or they could look at this again and say, here's 100 pieces. Which would you rather share it with 10 people or 100 people? So that's a way where they can understand why tenths are more than hundredths. Because up till now, they've learned that tens are more than 100s. But with decimals, tenths are more than 100. Or did I say that backwards? Hundreds are more than tens, and then decimals, tenths are more than 100ths. Okay. Another way we can represent that with kids is, again, this square stands for 1 whole. If we want them to show 3 tenths, they would color in 3 of these. If we want them to show 15 hundredths, they will color in 15 squares. Again, this also helps them to see the difference and why tenths are more than hundredths. Okay. In addition, we want them to understand how tenths and hundredths are equivalent. So 4 tenths and 40 hundredths are the same. So this is our 1 whole, this is 4 tenths, this is 40 hundredths. Okay. Moving on to 5th grade. 5th graders are still working with numbers, whole numbers up to 1 million. They're working with tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Okay, so we can bring this back again. So again, this is our 1 whole. Well, I can even keep it here. Look, so here's 4 tenths, here's 40 hundredths, and then if you can see this square, it's broken into 1,000 pieces. And then we want them to see how 400 thousandths, 40 hundredths, and 4 tenths are all equivalent. And we want them to be able to compare and contrast the numbers, compare them, and put them in order. So if this was 500 thousandths, you would put it in order 15 hundredths, 3 tenths, and 500 thousandths. Also, kids in 5th grade are rounding decimals as well. So go back to a little bit more of the whole numbers and decimals. Something that's really important is we call it the power of 10. So for example, if we had the number 800 or 8,888 and 88 hundredths, let's say, we teach them that every time you multiply by 10, you're going over 1 place. Oh, I need this one. And so on. So every time you're going over times 10. When you're going smaller, every place value over, you're dividing by 10. And let me show you why this is important. So say, for example, kids are trying to figure out 5,000 times 10. Many times, and I said this back in the day myself, I used to say, okay, 5 times 1 is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Add on 4 zeros, okay? That is really not helpful for kids to learn that rule because you don't always add on zeros. And really, if you think you're adding on 4 zeros, really this is what adding on 4 zeros means. So equals 5. It's important for them to understand that the place value moves 1 to the left because it's getting bigger. Same thing if you're dividing, let's say this time by 100, this becomes 50. So let me show you a case where you're not adding any zeros, as they say, or taking away zeros. So for example, if you had 4 and 8/10, that's where that and is very important to say here and not before. 4 and 8/10 times 10 equals 48. Okay, what happens if we follow that rule from before? Well, kids could think, okay, well I know 1 times 48 is 48, add that 0, it's 480. And that's not right, it's 48. Same thing if we had 4 and 8/10 divided by 10, we're really not adding or taking away any zeros. This is becoming 48 hundredths. Okay. So, to go back and review from kindergarten, in kindergarten, kiddos are working with numbers up to 20. First grade, they're working with numbers up to 120. Second grade, they're working with numbers up to 1,000. Third grade, they're working with numbers up to 10,000. Fourth grade, they're working up to numbers 1,000,000 and tenths and hundredths. And fifth grade, they're working with, again, whole numbers and tenths, hundredths, and thousands. And it's really fun for me to see how kids are learning place value from kindergarten through fifth grade. I hope that this video helped you. Don't forget to subscribe to see more math videos. Thanks.